Yeah, so what made you decide to start fasting?
Well, I
Even though
started
I
getting,
feel like,
yep.
it's something a lot of people do because, in terms of religion, I feel like it's something that's been around for a while. But I feel like the fasting you do is a little, I think, you know, on average, I feel like it's a little bit more intense than the average person in the population.
So there's two kinds of fasting. And the one that I've been doing since 2008 is called intermittent fasting. And that one is the one that's all the rage or rage, whatever the term is. And that one is basically compressing the amount of time in the day you eat your food. And the benefits are longevity, weight loss, et cetera, et cetera. Many, 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 many benefits. And roughly a year and a half ago, I had this, I would say, intuitive push within me to do what it's called block fasting, which is multi-day water or no calorie intake for several days straight. And so, for example, in 2020, I did 50 days of block fasting. Not all at once, don't get me wrong. Hey, we got a visitor. But we, well, what happened is I started with that, and now it became easier over time. Not that it was easy, don't get me wrong, but it became easier over time. And then this year I said, you know what, I'm going to double it. And the reason I was the question, why do I do it, or what got me started? Let me read
What
it.
made you decide to start?
I would say divine I was divinely pushed. Like I almost feel like I don't have a choice but to continue down this journey. And in the process, one, I learned what to do, not to do. I've read lots of books on it, but I also wasn't always happy with my weight. I said I'd like to lose an extra X many pounds, and that kind of happens naturally. And then, but what's fascinating, what I really have learned is one of the major, major, major benefits is it. One of the things that kind of helps us humans kind of get to where we want to go is kind of cleaning up our garbage, our mess, our trauma, our beliefs that don't support us. And it forces that stuff all to come to the surface, like bubbling up. So literally, when you do a water fast, you won't have this on an intermittent fasting, but on a water fast, most nights are almost like remembrances of the trauma. And you wake up, you're like, whoa, but it's kind of gone. It's a really interesting experience. So um, if you know someone who likes to run away from their stuff and they're not willing to do, let's say, the work that may be required on a conscious level to clean up their traumas and stuff, have them do a water fast, because it literally brings it to the surface and you have no choice but to face it. And it won't be pleasant. Um, but but the cool thing is, and the great thing about water fasting, from my experience, also, is it has an ebb and flow, in that there's some days that are kind of easy. Like I did 2 weeks, for example, in a row last year, and of that 2 week, I had a 4 or 5 day span. I never thought about food. I drank water, had a liter or two a day, but I never thought about food. It was crazy. And then there was times I was like, I just want to sleep all day and be lazy, and because your body goes through a self cleaning as well, and it's a really interesting experience. And everyone's like, all the messages, because I have lots of people I'll tell, because it helps me have an accountability to actually complete it if I tell people. So it's partially, people say I inspire them, and I appreciate the inspiration. But also, if I say, for example, the one I started about a week, little just over a week ago, I did a 7 day fast this year. When I started that, I'm like, I'm doing 7 days. If I didn't put it on there, and if I didn't tell my wife, and I didn't tell these friends or whatever, I wouldn't have done it. I would have done 2 or 3 days, and that would have been it. But it's very, very, it's like a external accountability. And then I get messages all day. Hey, John, I started a fast. Well, obviously I have to keep it up, since you're now doing it and I'm your inspiration. And then, so it really helps. And then tell me, how's your journey? How you doing? Like all that kind of stuff makes it so I have to do it.
Right.
So it's a being generous and, I guess, inspirational to others, but also gives me a tremendous level of accountability and forces me to do it. I'm going to say what I'm going to do. So
Yeah.
I absolutely it goes both ways. In other words, it's just as much as for me as those who say I'm inspiring them or motivating them or whatever. But the
Yeah.
long ones I'm doing, a word of caution, unless you've done intermittent fasting, I'd say for 3 to 6 months and you're confident, don't do it, because you'll feel like literal garbage because the toxins literally dump in your system. And unless you've done that for several 3-day block fasts or these longer fasts, don't do it either. It actually has a life-threatening potentiality because your body actually dumps toxins into your colon. And when you break your fast, most people are, well, we're all food addicted. So we're addicted to certain kinds of food, and foods that don't flush your system, like fruits and veggies. Like, let's say, oh, I'm going to have a couple pies. I'm going to go down the corner and get some doubles. They're delicious, but they plug your system and that can literally kill you. Because what happens is the toxins get reabsorbed because your body doesn't have a bowel movement. So it's a crazy detriment. So I always tell people, know what the heck you're doing if you're doing longer than 3 days. 3 days, do what you want. When you go longer than 3 days, read some books. I'm happy to give references. Talk to someone who's done it like me, or in other words, do some research, because at that point, if you don't know what you're doing, because occasionally people die, and that's how they die. They toxify themselves.
Ooh, exciting, but now also scary.
Yeah, well, and I like to bring that word of caution, which is why you'll often hear doctors saying don't fast unless it's medically supervised. So, and the secret, by the way, for that person who eats the doubles is, before you start the fast, buy some laxatives. So regardless of what food you decide to start eating again, you create that flush, because all you need is the flush.
And what's the longest water fast that you've done?
I did 14 days last year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and well, here's the most amazing part from my perspective is I worked out 4 times in the first week. I worked 10 or 12 of those 14 days. So it would be like a 10-hour workday some days,
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
So just before I go ahead, I just want to say hi to AC because I see that she came on. I just want to acknowledge her. And AC did submit a question for you.
Okay.
But I think I'll get to that question a little bit. Hi, AC.
Good morning.
I think I'll get to that question a little bit later on. And also, once I get through enough of my questions, if AC wants to ask anything about what we have been discussing, you can share as well. So I don't know if you might want to write it down, AC, while we're talking, if anything comes up that you want us to. Oh, AC is so cute. She's just giving me a thumbs up.
It's so good to see you, AC. It really is great to see you.
I feel like I've been tempted. I feel like it has occurred to me so many times that I want to fast that I feel, it's like it's almost an inevitability that it's going to happen. It just hasn't happened as yet, but I feel like it's definitely going to happen.
Well, no. Go ahead.
Yes. And no, when you said 14 days, I thought about this. I saw this interview on YouTube. That so many things people talk about online now. And this lady, she met someone in Sweden or something like that. And one of those European countries. And the person said, and I guess it's not only her, but probably there are a group of persons who've been doing this for a long time. It's just not common knowledge to the rest of us. And the person said that they hadn't eaten food, like any kind of food, for like 9 years or something. And I guess there's a group of persons who've probably done that. It's just that we haven't heard about them as yet. So it's just new information to us, but people have been doing this for a while now. But I just find that so amazing.
That's the goal. I mean, that's the eventuality of it.
Yeah.
Because think about it from a spiritual perspective. We are divinity. We are an expression of God living in physical form. And this physical form shouldn't need to rely on its environment if we are truly of a godly thing, and we are. So the eventuality of this, most people who do fasting, so they start off with intermittent fasting, like I did, right? And then as their body cleans up, because you clean up every time you do the intermittent fasting, you're like, I'm going to eat a little better. When you eat a little better, you clean up a little bit more. So if you ask these people this path, it's always very similar to this. They start eating better, more veggies, occasional fruits, and then they start doing the block fast, like the water fast longer, right? And then they become usually mainly fruit at some point. And then there's a transition where they're juices, not water yet, juices for a while, maybe 6 months of like orange juice or something. And then one day they're like, I'm just gonna have water. And then some of them go the full breath, which is, well, the full scope, which is breatharian, which is truly living off the energy of the divine that's just out there. Most people that do it, I would say you would call a liquidarian, which is where they still have water. Because apparently one of the challenges, because I've read about this, and you're right, no one talks about it. It's like it doesn't exist. But they have actually done medical studies on a couple. They did one on a guy in India, probably 5-10 years ago, who he was a breatharian, like he did not drink water. The challenge those people achieve typically, well, that they experience, is because they do not sweat, because the body is conserving that liquid. What happens is they overheat. So if an exercising kind of person, like a fit person, they get really, really hot. So if those that drink water, the body can self-cool better. So most people who follow this route are liquidarians. And yeah, so it's very interesting. And you're right, no one talks about it. No one ever
That's
talks
so
about it.
exciting. This is so exciting. And I'm actually really excited about the part where you said the trauma comes up,
Mm-hmm.
because all of the times when the thought has come to me when I think I want to do some fasting, I guess I would use the same word I use. It just intuitively feels to me like I'll just be more clear within myself, like
Mm-hmm.
just more pure and more clear, and I'll just have more clarity about everything within myself. And so that's kind of what I feel, and why it is that thought comes to me like, yeah, I want to fast. I feel like it'll be so great. So even though you're saying like, like trauma comes up, like for me, I'm like, that is so exciting, because I just like want to be more clear and just light.
It only comes up with block fasting, though. It won't come up with intermittent fasting.
Right.
Your body has to go, I'd say, maybe 36 to 48 hours of water fasting before trauma
Yeah.
begins to pop up.
Yeah. Well, maybe that wouldn't happen for like the next 5 years, but sometime in the future.
True. I mean, I always just tell people, just start. The easiest way to start is move dinner back an hour early,
Yeah.
make breakfast an hour later, and what you'll find is just more clarity, and you'll be fine. But don't jump, because they have like these where you can eat like in a 4 or 5, 6 hour window of time. That took years for me to get there. Like, don't jump to there. Otherwise, you're like, this is nuts. I'm a headache. I'm a terrible mood. Like, it's not worth it. But slowly shrink it down. But the biggest benefit you'll notice, two benefits: mental clarity will be off the charts. Off the charts. Notice, well, they know this in like the corporate world, for example. They never give high-level tests or training post-lunch, ever. Because everyone's like, your energy's down, you're mentally off, you're kind of foggy. So we all know this, because we've all like, oh, how was lunch? It was good. I'm ready to take a nap. If the food brings your energy down, that's a signal, I guess is my point. So part of my path was actually moving to food that made me have energy while working, and then it took a while, because the food that tastes the best, at least on like a fiending, like you're addicted to it, is unfortunately the food that usually drains you the most. Like I had this giant bowl of watermelon, right? People don't fiend for watermelon. I mean, maybe kids do, but I'm gonna have energy until noon, and I
Yeah.
don't feel remotely tired. And if
Yeah.
you saw how much I had, Ashanna, you're like, yeah, you're eating so much. But the point is, it doesn't take I'm light. I feel good, mentally
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's a fun path, and
Yeah.
I think everyone is going to be on it, because I think
Yeah.
that's direction humanity is moving towards our next version of ourselves, which is a much more spiritual version of us, and that version of us is just doesn't need the food as much.
Yeah.
I have rarely do I meet a person who's like who hasn't noticed they're eating less than they used to.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting thing we're in.
It is
Unique,
very,
beautiful, and interesting times.
it is so interesting. And then you start to think about all the other implications, like how we're still tied to this economic model. But then when all of these things shift, you actually have less need for money in certain ways. So like there's this whole, so everything is affecting everything else, and there's this whole transition, and it's like literally your mind will explode when you start to go into it. But
true, think about it. If you own your house and you own your clothing, besides your vehicle, and you don't need to eat, what are your expenses? I mean, the occasional,
exactly,
it's like they're so minimal.
yeah, it's like you're so free.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, some years ago, I was looking at some videos, futuristic type videos talking about where humanity is going. And they were talking about the age of abundance, and again, I think when you look globally, you realize there's this quote that someone said, which said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Mm.
So like when you look globally, you see, wait, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, right. They're talking about abundance and how in the future it's everything, people are going to have everything that they need. Like if you need internet, it's going to be so inexpensive, Wi-Fi. If you need to have food, if you need to have communication, it's going to be so accessible to everyone that there's not going to be this mindset of, oh, something is out of my reach. I need to work so hard to get this money so I can afford these things. And I think they're just like we're talking about with the fasting, there are persons who are at different points on that trajectory already. So there are persons who already passed this conversation that I'm having right now, and they're like, yeah, Shanna, that's in the past. Like we're already in, everything's already free, like we are already there. But I think to come out, for some persons to come out of that mindset, it will be kind of difficult just to, like, for persons who feel like they still have to work and they have to do all of these things and it's so challenging, like actually having freedom, I think will be kind of very drastic for persons to think about, like just to not have to work.
It will make them crazy. I mean, maybe for 2 or 3 weeks they'll feel like they're just on vacation, but then they're like, "What the heck am I doing all day?"
Exactly.
It's very foreign for them.
Exactly. Exactly. But so getting back to the fasting in terms of health and vitality and all of that, I know that you have done a number of things. You've done a lot of research in that field, and you do train physically as well. And I wondered if you had to categorize the things that you think have had the most drastic change in your health and your fitness, what those three things would be.
Health and fitness. So health, I would definitely say fasting, and both intermittent and block. But I would say I feel so good after a block fast, like because I literally 2.5 days ago I finished this week long one. I feel incredible. Like I worked out this morning. I can go when I'm done. When we're done, like I may work out like that. You have a tremendous amount of vitality. So I feel really, really, really good. So I would say the block fasting, but again, that's a muscle. So those watching, please build into it. Another thing that's really been important for me was shifting my diet to things that made me feel really energized. And again, foods of civilization don't really do that. They're delicious, the delicious meats, the pies, etc., but they kind of drag us down. So and sugars and all that. So I began shifting that too, so towards vegetables and fruits. So I feel very light, but the challenge with that, FYI, is you get very hungry. And you do have to have something, usually towards the end of the day, like your last meal, that makes you feel full, so you can go to sleep without feeling like you're thinking about food all day. That's my big challenge with it. So that would be like a ground provision or steam plantain, something like that. So those two. And then I would just say, moving your body consistently in a way that feels good for you. I don't like necessarily saying you should be doing this or you should be doing that. The person can say, I want to dance, dance. You want to do yoga? Do yoga. You want to do weights? Do weights. You want to do, doesn't really matter. But once people start moving their bodies for a week or two, because most people don't work out at all, and they're like, huh, and they start getting past the I'm sore and achy, because initially the body just really hurts. It feels really, really good. And then once they begin getting that momentum, and like their life will shift. I find if people exercise consistently, they will shift in so many ways. Their confidence will boom. The way their energy throughout the day, their mental clarity, their level, their sleep. Most people sleep terribly. So like it fixes a lot of stuff. And because they begin fixing that, a lot of the other things they do that aren't so healthy will kind of clean themselves up naturally, because it feels so good to feel good. And so I would say and if I were to rank those three, exercise would be number one, because you can be a pretty garbage eater, start exercising, and you'll naturally have a desire to eat healthier.
Yes.
You know, but if you eat healthy, there's a lot of lazy healthy eaters. And I'm not saying you have to be a fitness nut. I'm just saying take a walk. It doesn't have to be that. It just has to be move. Enjoy the sun. Go sit in some beautiful park somewhere. You know, it doesn't have to be anything insane, but just something of movement will shift how you feel.